The Badlands Saga by Derek Weisman. Narrated by Aaron Sin. Part 1. Homelands. It is dangerous to be right in matters on which the established authorities are wrong. Voltaire. Chapter 1. Cathy. The mansion used to be filled with life. Friends from all over the lands brought exotic stuff and perspectives. The library was packed with numerous books that could never satisfy my bottomless curiosity. Finally, the farm that had held all my beloved animals, each one just as special as the last. Then my husband Mitch got black diamond disease. The so-called friends cast us off to save their own skin. The books were either sold or burnt for fuel. The mansion was scrapped for parts. And my beloved zoo, oh God, do I miss them all. Finding shelter at Mitch's father's fortress, I watched the glorious city of Ares slowly devouring itself. The people with black diamonds slowly crystallized into statues. Gangs prowled the streets for easy prey, while junkies scavenged for potions and crystals to feed their addiction. All the while, fires spread across the city, polluting the once clean air. Hell had annexed our kingdom. Looking away from our kingdom in the valley, I turned my attention back to my husband. Lying on his bed, I saw Mitch's body was covered in black hard crystals. Like diamonds, they reflected light and were impossible to destroy. The stones attached like leeches and were beyond painful to peel off. Even if one could peel it off, another one would just grow back. And like a tumor, they grow and spread across the body, paralyzing every fiber until the victim was made out of stone. Some people die an agonizing death from having crystals growing in vital areas, heart, lungs, legs, or even the brain. The best way to get rid of the disease was to catch it early on and in a non-vital area of the body. That way it can be cut off and save the host's life. Too bad the disease was transmitted through liquid, or that single glass shard that was found on Mitch's head would have been taken out a long time ago. As I took a seat next to my husband's bed, I saw him drooling and laughing like a little child, loving life as if it was all one big playground, despite him being 23 summers old. "Puddin'!" Mitch yelled with joy. "Puddin'!" "I will get you some," I said as I held his soft hand. "Please be patient." "Puddin'!" he said in a rhythmic chant. "Puddin'! Puddin'! Puddin'!" I gave him a brave smile and walked out of his chamber. It took me 10 minutes to reach the fortress kitchen. When I entered the kitchen, I noticed that I was completely alone. No servants, no cooks, no soldiers, no one. When I felt completely isolated, I started to cry. "Please, God," I whispered, "save my husband." Chapter 2. Lee. Being a mercenary, you get to see all the beautiful sights that the world has to offer, like the Arctic Sea, where you can assassinate a Union leader. In the mountains, where you can take out some mountain rebels, or my personal favorite, traveling through the dead forest, uninhabited since time began. The forest did not get its name because of being barren. No, the real reason the locals called the forest that was the fact that there was no animal life, no bird, bear, or even a butterfly. Just black spotted trees and endless fungus that produced more toxins than cyanide. Even a whiff of the air could kill a man 1,000 times over. The unlivable forest was perfect for plant growth and flying convoys. No living being dared to set foot in the dead forest. Unless you were a mercenary. It was dark and silent in the dead forest. No sound could be heard for miles on end. There were no signs of life except for the stars in the sky. If there were any incident to take place, no one would come. Perfection comes once in a blue moon. Wearing a rubber suit too hot for my own good, and a too tight gas mask, my comrade James and I were loading the bloodhound stones into the launchers. We were careful not to drop the stone into the mortar. Just one crack would cause the stone to blow up. Even though they are harder than iron, they can blow up anything in a 5-kilometer radius. No pressure. "How's your mortar doing?" I asked James. "Been ready for the last 5 minutes," James said. "I guess fucking all those whores is making you rusty." "Not as rusty as your trombone," I countered. James gave me the bird. Once the bloodhound stones were in place, I looked up to see a soccer field-sized zeppelin flying overhead. On it was the royal emblem of the royal family of Apollo. "The royal family is early," James said. "Yes, they are," I said as I aimed the launcher. 20 roses that I perform regicide. You're on." We both pointed the mortar at the zeppelin. Once aimed, we pulled the trigger and let loose hell. A series of red explosions erupted across the bow of the zeppelin, and like a stone, it fell at an ungodly speed towards the forest. Once the zeppelin struck the earth, James and I picked up our .45 caliber submachine guns and rushed towards the downed zeppelin. Tonight, we earn our pay. The crash site was littered with debris and corpses. Nothing moved as the air was too poisonous to even whiff, along with the fact that the crash would kill them before the forest. Still, James and I cautiously checked the crash site to make sure there were no survivors. Traversing the debris-infested land, we saw nothing but corpses. From young to old, no one made it out of the crash. We saw everyone, including women and children, lying still and covered in their own piss and shit. By the looks of everything, there were no survivors. Approaching the downed zeppelin, we saw the same outcome on the ground. No survivors and a lot of destruction. Before I could tell James to head out, the belly of the zeppelin burst open. A spider-like machine came crawling out as if the zeppelin was an egg. In the center of the mechanical arachnid was the king. He was inside a glass bubble that was built to shelter anyone from the toxicity. Like a child, the king could not pilot the metal beast. Even with the .50 caliber machine guns, it was obvious that the king had no experience in war. He most likely came from a pampered kingdom where the royals were spoiled, where war never thickens their skin and conflict was reserved for the lower classes, basically children who knew nothing about the real world. So it came with no surprise when we fired our submachine guns, the glass shattered like a bubble. Thus, the poisonous air rushed in and killed the king. Once the king was done, we retreated back into the safety of darkness. We would have done more, but the crash did most of the work. Between the poisonous air and the building forest fire, it was best to run off. As the inferno spread across the land, it was high time that James and I got out of the area. We needed to avoid incoming patrols. Plus, we needed to figure which of us owns 20 roses. Chapter 3. Samael. Taking a life was not a hard thing to do. It was no different from stepping on a bug or cutting the throat of a human being. Every living being is destined to die. No one, not even all the gods of existence, can change this fact. Maybe that's why I became an assassin, because death was the only simple thing I understood out of this mess called life. There was no middle ground, no political correctness, nor even being fair. All that mattered was getting the job done, no matter what. It's that simple. It was a moonless night in the town of District 23 of the city-state of Zeus. Everyone was dead asleep, and the streets were more barren than an old nun's cunt. Not even the dogs were barking, showing that the night was ripe for the taking. As I walked through the streets with a hood over my head, I kept my senses receptive to my environment. I don't want to be caught with sulfur stones forced into prison. Only Ares knows who they will send to clean up the mess. So far, the streets were still deserted as I reached the target's home. I saw there were no lights coming from the windows, a sign that no one was even aware of my presence. I jumped over their fence and walked towards their drinking well. I took out the sulfur stones and dropped them into the well. I only had 5 minutes before this whole block turned into a disaster zone. Have to be quick, or I will be joining the dead. I jumped over the neighbor's fence, only to have a small dog barking at me. Great, I thought. The little bastard's going to get me killed. Without even thinking, I took hold of the dog's neck and snapped it into two. I hoped the dog would not make a sound. However, It made a brief yelping noise that caused the lights to turn on. I dashed to the next yard and returned to the street. When I got enough distance from the target area, I turned into an alley and took out my spare clothes. I quickly changed into a common's uniform and threw my other clothes into the garbage. I walked back onto the streets and continued my merry way. I did not even make 3 meters when a deafening roar erupted. The whole neighborhood came rushing out to see what the disaster was. I already knew what happened. The sulfur stone reacted to the water and set the whole aquifers aflame. Anything under the underground water source will explode and cause the whole block to collapse onto itself, killing anyone who is in the area in the process. I don't know what some guy did to piss off the royal court of Ares. However, it was none of my business. I was not paid to comprehend. I was paid to do the dirty work. Chapter 4. Cathy.
Walking back to Mitch's room, I prayed that no one noticed the redness in my eyes. Last thing they need was for anyone to think their princess was weak, especially when the kingdom was slowly rotting itself towards oblivion. When I got to Mitch's room, I saw his father sitting right beside him. The poor old king had a saddened look on his face as he stared at his son's slow demise.
"Hello, Cathy,"
the king said.
"Did you get my wonderful son some pudding?"
"Yes," I said as I sat the chocolate jelly on the nightstand. "He deserves the pudding more than anyone else."
"No one deserves anything,"
the king said as tears trailed down his eyes.
"You either want it or you don't, and right now my son wants pudding."
"I don't know which is more painful, watching your husband of 2 years slowly die, or watching your son grow from a spoiled baby to a 4-star general, and then degenerate back to being a baby once again. How's the kingdom?" I asked, hoping to change the subject.
"The black diamond has dissipated,"
the king said.
"However, it will take decades to repair from the outbreak. At least that was what our neighboring wizards said when scouted the city with their mind-controlled eagles."
"You let foreign wizards scout our territory?"
"Now is not the time for homeland laws,"
the king growled.
"The black diamond had destroyed this whole damn kingdom. We lost a majority of the population to the disease and the rest to barbarism. We do not have the strength or resources to rebuild. We need the other kingdoms in order to rebuild."
"But we will be dependent on—" The king gave me a hostile glare, not a hostility of anger. He was far too wise and experienced for that. No, it was that of an authority and the boldness to do the job.
"I don't need a commoner to point out the obvious,"
the king said.
"But sometimes we must yield to something greater in order to survive."
"Even at the cost of your whole family's life?" I asked.
"Watch your tongue, bitch. The only reason you're even part of this court was because Mitch fell head over heels for you. If I had my way, I would never allow a filthy farm rat to even touch my castle."
"Maybe so," I said. "But how many of your royal family are capable of cleaning themselves up, let alone run a whole country?" Now I saw the anger in his eyes. He knew that most of the family had either died by Black Diamond or disabled from decades of inbreeding, and with Mitch coming ever so close to death, he had no rightful heir for their kingdom.
"Get out,"
the king ordered. Taking one last look at Mitch, I left the room without as much as a word. I don't want to start battling with Mitch in the room. He's going through enough hell as it is. Sadly for me, my battle with the king would turn itself into a full-blown war.
Chapter 5. Lee.
It hadn't been a day since the regicide of the whole Apollo royal family. Already what's left of the royal court was declaring that revolutionaries were responsible. Thus, they cracked down on any liberal or revolutionary parties that stood for change, thus securing the state's power over the Apollo city-state. At least, that was what the Athenian wireless radio said as James and I drank at the company's bar. As much as there had been violent acts of revolutionary across the homelands, they were not responsible for hiring us. Firstly, the revolutionaries could not afford us. They are too disorganized and are more like protesters than terrorists, unless they managed to obtain a massive oil well, like the blacks of the Endless Oasis. They wouldn't be able to talk to us. Secondly, they bloodhound stones are only available to us mercenaries. We could afford the alchemist for top-grade magic. No one, not even state-run militaries, got the stuff that we got. Thirdly, and most importantly, the late king was a liberal guy. He wanted to form a constitutional monarchy to avoid the incoming bloodshed. Too bad that did not go well for the court. The idea of a parliament was a worse fate than Black Diamond for some powerful people. For if the people obtain power, they will surely face a fate worse than Black Diamond.
Can you believe the shit on the wireless?
James asked as I drank my beer. No, I said as I put the mug down. There's nothing but shit on the radio since the creation of the damn thing.
There you have a point. Nothing but propaganda and that deafening piss-ass music called jazz.
I miss bluegrass, I said as I tipped the bartender. Bluegrass was fun, and it lacked the electrical instruments that plague the radio wave. We exited the bar and walked out into a training field. From the ages of 20 to 30, I saw men pushing their bodies, minds, and souls to the max. They practiced trench warfare, anti-air warfare, hand-to-hand combat. Hell, they even practiced flying those horrid biplanes. God, do I hate heights. The thought of falling out of those damn mechanical devils. Too scary to even think.
Let's watch the new recruits,
James said. Why? I asked. Give you something to dream about?
Hey, just because you're my brother-in-arms does not mean you can abuse your homo-jug privileges. At least not in public. Besides, we need to talk.
There was a serious tone in James's voice when he said that. A tone that he normally used when something uncomfortable was about to take place. Taking a seat on the bench, we saw the evil bastards known as drill sergeants testing the new recruits. You could tell they are not breaking by the screaming and yelling of the drill sergeants because they were hard men. They were experienced soldiers who had suffered the wrath of war. From the failed colonization of the Badlands to the enforcement of royal powers, these men had seen the worse and suffered the worse, yet, like me, they knew that war offered more comfortable than so-called civilian life could give. There was a safe sense of your brother looking out for you, the thrill of dark-skinned demons trying to kill you, or burning a band of revolutionaries in a wooden home. God, I love war.
Do you ever think of the future?
James asked. I winced to James' question. What do you mean? I asked.
The future. Do you ever think of something else besides fighting, fucking, and killing your liver with beer?
Nope. James looked at me with a disappointed look.
I'm seriously, James said as he took out a cigarette. There has to be more to life than doing all three.
Like what? I asked. We get paid in gold, screw like bunnies, drink till we pass out, and fight like bastards. What more do we need?
How about a family?
James said. I winced to his comment. Then I laughed. You need a woman to do that, I mocked.
I'm serious. I want to raise kids and relax for once in my life. I'm tired of the killing and the slaughtering and the meaningless sex. I want to die of old age.
I gave James a shocked look. You really do want to leave, I said. James was silent for a while, trying to think of the words. Once the words were put together, he spoke in a calm tone.
Back when we met in boot camp, you were the only one who kept me sane. Not in a lover's way, but something more. You were the only one who accepted me the way I am.
I had to, I said as I felt the tsunami of shock replaced by the flood of sadness. You saved my ass countless times. Plus, my brother was a homosexual. Who was I to judge?
That's why I stuck by you over the years,
James said, as he finally lit his cigarette.
You were the only one who was fun, loyal, and tolerant enough to put up with me.
You were a real pain in the arse. No pun intended.
God, I am going to miss your homophobic jokes.
And I am going to miss my brother-in-arms, I said. When do you plan to leave?
When my contract expires in a month. Once that's done, I am going to the city-state of Venus. Try to build a life there.
Well, make sure you invite me over sometime. Just keep your husband from hitting on me. James shot me a smile and smothered his cigarette onto the bench.
I will keep that in mind.
We watched in silence as the drill sergeants put the fresh meat through the trenches. It would be the most memorable moment of the day. if I wasn't going to lose my best friend to life. Chapter 6. Samael.
The neutral city was where the 12 major city-states play diplomacy. It is a city-state that refused to side with anyone and acted as a negotiation zone. They show no interest in war. Only wealth keeps this mountainous city afloat. At least, that was what their government states. In reality, the neutral city was an information paradise for spies and assassins. The city's vast information network made it easy for the right person to find their target. Since the city was impersonal with its neighbors, the leaders decided to sell the information to the highest bidders, which pays for a lot of the luxuries that most people in the homelands couldn't even dream of. It was in this treacherous city where I made my home. Along with my crafty backstabbing masters owns my existence. The neutral city was filled with life as the sun descended into the horizon. From the window of a horse-driven carriage, I saw kids play with remote-control biplanes. Electric street lamps brought daylight to the people. Finally, steam-powered carriages that outpaced any animal. Everyone was fat because I was in a high-end neighborhood. For some strange reason, the city reminded me of a sacrificial pig. Back in the old country, the pigs were fattened up until they can't even stand up. Fat was a precious resource in the old country, because the land was harsh, and only the strongest would obtain fat in their system. And since the gods were as mortal as the rest of existence, they must be fed. Once the pig was fat enough, the priestess would take the pig and cut the head off at the altar, thus feeding the gods once more. Looking back at the old country customs, I could tell that the city-states, along with the others, were ripe for destruction. Everyone in the higher classes were fattened pigs, ready to be sacrificed to the gods. The knife will be the revolutionaries who will slit their jugular. The altar would be the goddess of the republic. The fat will be the blood of the upper royals. The very thought of royal blood feeding the goddess made my stomach turn. Only the gods know what kind of poison swims in their veins. The carriage stopped at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was a heavily fortified building with guards, mutated dogs from the Badlands, and walking tanks. And that was just the front door. I know places in the ministry where they wired some places with paralyzing tear gas that can stop your breathing. But I was not worried. I was more concerned about the next mission. I hope it takes me somewhere cold. I was hungry for some seal fat right now. As I entered the pristine building, I entered an elevator, pushed a button, and descended into the ground. Once I was 4 levels underground, I saw the 8 ministers sitting in an arch formation. They were all old men who got the title because of blood. Not like the old country, where merit was more important. If they were smart, they would put men with experience in the chair. But, of course, I knew it would only be a matter of time before the sacrifice would come to them.
Samael,
the chief said with authority,
you did an outstanding job with the taking care of the Zeus Workers' Party. But I am very disappointed with you as well.
Here comes the whiplash.
23 people lost their lives because of that explosion. Do you have any idea how we are to tell the king about this slaughtering?
It was a good way to cover our tracks, sir, I said.
All 8 of them were shocked by my statement.
Explain yourself, one of the lower ministers demanded.
I studied the occupants of the block, I said. Some were part of Zeus's secret police, a lesbian couple, and the leader of the Workers' Party. Everyone in that block was a target for mass killing. It should take their secret police some time before they can track us down. No one tried to counter my decision. They knew that the sulfur stones were common in the industry city-state of Zeus. Anyone working in the industry would be a suspect, especially the workers.
Yes, the chief said. Let's continue with your next mission.
Have you heard of what happened in the city of Ares?
You mean the Black Diamond Plague, I said.
The very one. Apparently some black market marketer managed to get past customers with tainted diamonds. The whole city fell under the plague and thousands are dead.
What's in Ares? Out of the darkness,
One of the servants gave me a picture. If I were not chemically castrated, I would have found this woman attractive. She had the looks that the old country goddess had. Hell, she could have anyone she wanted.
Her name is Cathy,
the chief said.
She is a sympathizer for the revolutionaries.
What's her status? I asked. Wife of a minister, industrious, church leader.
A commoner who married into the royal courts. She grew up among the rural countryside. Her diary, which was copied by the Aries secret police, states the dislike of the abuse of the court, thinking of moderate reform.
Probably this Cathy woman just wanted to help the poor. I mean, the people of Aries do lack the basics in living. Food, water, hell. Some people don't even have a roof. And if this woman came from there, she would want to improve her people's lives. The most likely reason for this hit was because the Aries court was corrupt and wanted to get rid of another nuisance. How did she get into the royalty? I asked.
She worked as a servant in the court,
the chief said.
While working, she managed to catch the eye of a general. We don't know who seduced whom, but one thing for sure was they both got married.
How did he manage to get away with it?
He commanded the whole army. No one in the court dared to get in his way.
Well, the good thing is, the general got Black Diamond, so she is open to being taken out.
In the kingdom, or somewhere far away?
Far away,
the chief said, as he took his papers in his hand.
We want the public to think the revolutionaries were responsible. We will lure the princess out of the kingdom to save her husband, maybe even to save the kingdom. All you have to do is just be there.
Sounds simple enough.
Let's hope it is,
the chief said as he got out of his chair. His entourage soon followed.
You have a day to rest up.
And just like that, the hunt begins.